It's the things that are being said, even to the extent that people are saying that I probably killed Marcus in the hospital because I was having an affair. And Rodney Howard Brown got caught up in the conversation with you and told Jimmy that Doug was texting me that he never sexed me, that he is a pure man and that we didn't have sex until we got married, that he was texting me in January after Marcus died in November. Jonathan is aware of this, but the lie was spread because Rodney went and told other people, and that's the damage that you've done to me and to a godly man who has integrity and is known for his integrity. Hello, faithful brothers and sisters in the Lord. Today we're talking about a story that has everyone in Christian. It's about Joni Lamb, one of the co-founders of Daystar television network, and her recent marriage to Dr. Doug Weiss, a Christian sex therapist. Yes, you read correctly, a sex therapist. The news of their relationship sent shockwaves through churches, ministry circles, and even living rooms across the country. Let's start with the basics, because if you haven't been following the story from the beginning, it can get a little confusing. Joni A. Lamb has been a public figure in the Christian television industry for years. She and her late husband, Marcus Lamb, helped build Daystar, and together they transformed it into one of the most influential Christian networks in the world, reaching over 2 billion people worldwide. It was a great loss for Joni and the entire Daystar family this morning at 4:01 a.m., as Marcus was not only a co-founder, but also a respected leader, teacher, and voice in the Christian world. He went away tragically in late since Joni had recently lost her life and ministry partner. Everyone expected her to take some time to grieve. However, not even 2 years later, Joni made the shocking announcement that she was in a new relationship, not just any relationship, but with Doug Weiss, a man who had recently gone through a highly public divorce after being married for more than 30. This is where things really started to stir up controversy, because Doug Weiss is well known in Christian circles. He works as a therapist, speaker, and author. He specializes in helping people recover from addiction and infidelity, and his reputation made it even more shocking when people learned that he had secretly divorced his wife, Lisa Weiss, whom he had been with for more than 30 years. The timing of everything seemed strange because Joni's husband, had only died a few months before Doug's divorce was finalized. And shortly after Doug and Joni went public with their relationship, many people couldn't help but wonder if this relationship had already developed before the divorce was even finalized, or if Joni was being influenced or even manipulated. According to sources close to the family, all three of Joanne's children, Joni, Rachel, and Susie Lamb, made it clear that they were uncomfortable with the relationship. They felt that Doug Weiss didn't have a good enough reason for ending his long-term marriage, and more importantly, they thought he might be taking advantage of Joni while she was still recovering from Marcus's death. It's one thing to deal with a family disagreement in private, but when you're part of a family that owns one of the largest Christian TV networks in the world, that disagreement quickly becomes public. While you might assume that the Lamb family was the only ones who had concerns about Joni's new relationship, some pretty big names in ministry shared their concern. For instance, Pastor Robert Morris even though he didn't personally approve of Joan and Doug's relationship, Robert Morris, the senior pastor at Gateway Church, one of the most well-known churches in America, agreed with Jonathan and Susie that it wasn't a wise move either. However, because his sermons air on Daystar, which means he has a business relationship with the network, he didn't publicly discuss it because he was caught in a difficult situation where he wanted to stand by his convictions, but also knew that speaking out could harm his ministry's exposure. This raises a serious question: how many other pastors or Christian leaders had similar concerns but remained silent to protect their platforms or their partnerships? When faith, family, and finances all get tangled, things can get messy very quickly. The situation involving Joni and Doug has caused people to question not just one relationship, but the entire culture surrounding Daystar and even the larger world of Christian broadcasting. For instance, should a leader get married again so soon after losing a spouse? What kind of accountability exists for Christian leaders when it comes to relationships? And perhaps the hardest question is, how much should public figures' private decisions affect their ministry? Only God knows the whole truth of what's going on in people's hearts, but Proverbs 11:14 reminds us that where there is no counsel, the people fall, but in the multitude of counselors, there is safety. Now that Joni and Doug are married, Daystar is proceeding under Joni direction, but the repercussions of this relationship, particularly the tension it caused within the Lamb family, are still being felt. Will Jonathan and Susie return to the network at some point? Will Daystar continue to have the same influence as before? Or are we witnessing the dawn of a new era with different faces, different values, and perhaps even a different direction? Let's take a closer look at one of the most courageous voices to speak out against Joni Lamb's recent marriage, Pastor Rodney Howard Brown. If you've been in Christian circles for a while, you've undoubtedly heard of him. Rodney is a well-known revivalist preacher who has made a name for himself by being passionate, outspoken, and completely unafraid to stir things up. When it came to Joni's decision to marry Christian sex therapist Doug Weiss, Rodney didn't hold back at all. While many pastors and Christian leaders remained silent, perhaps out of fear of jeopardizing ministry partnerships, or because they didn't want to get involved, Rodney made it clear exactly how he felt, and let's just say he wasn't supportive. According to those close to the situation, Rodney actually warned Joni directly, telling her straight up that this marriage could spell disaster not just for her personal life, but for the entire Daystar television network. That's a pretty serious claim, right? But Rodney felt the stakes were so high that he had a strong spiritual conviction, perhaps even a vision that this decision would cause chaos, not just emotional or family issues, drama, but a genuine upheaval off the ministry Joni and Marcus had spent decades established. To make matters even more intense, Rodney informed Joni that if she proceeded with the wedding, he would sever all ties with Daystar. That's right, he said he would never again appear on the network. After all, this is someone who has been featured on Christian television, preached revival, and addressed audiences worldwide. So hearing him say, "I'm out," isn't something you hear every day, and this wasn't just a passive disagreement. Rodney took his opposition very seriously. He didn't just give a polite warning or send a private message behind the scenes. He made his concerns public because he felt that Joni's credibility would be damaged by her marriage to Doug Weiss and perhaps tarnish the legacy Marcus Lamb had worked so hard to establish. Whether or not people believe in visions or prophetic words, Rodney said that his warnings were based on a strong spiritual impression from God that confirmed his fear. This wasn't just about opinion, it was about obedience to what he felt the Lord was showing him. He told Joni in no uncertain terms that if you marry Doug, things are going to fall apart. That's heavy, especially when you're talking to someone who recently lost her husband and is likely still dealing with a whirlwind of emotions, grief, and pressure to keep everything together. However, this is where the story takes a turn for the worse. Despite his warnings, Joni decided to proceed with the marriage. Despite Rodney's warnings, Joni followed through on her decision and married Doug Weiss. Now, regardless of your opinion of the marriage, you have to acknowledge that it took bravery for Joni to stand her ground. She knew that marrying Doug would upset people, including viewers who had looked up to her for years, powerful pastors, and even some of her own children. However, she still believed that she was making the right decision for her life and future. Of course, critics like Rodney Howard Brown weren't happy about it, and they continue to voice their concerns. Some people say, well, Joni is an adult, she can make her own choice. However, others like Rodney believe that leaders, particularly spiritual leaders, should be held to a higher standard because their choices affect not only themselves but also those who follow them. This leads us to a difficult question. When does personal freedom cross the line into public responsibility? Proverbs 27:6 states that sometimes the people who love us the most are the ones who are willing to tell us hard truths. Perhaps Rodney saw his role as protecting Joni even though hearing the truth was painful. Some people think Rodney went too far, while others feel that his warning was a necessary wake-up call. So where does that leave us now? Well, Joni is now married to Doug Weiss, and Rodney Howard Brown have remained steadfast in their decision to disassociate themselves from Daystar. As for the future, which is still in progress, will Daystar be affected as Rodney foresaw? Will viewers continue to support the network, or will the whole situation fade away over time? One thing is certain though, this moment in Daystar's history has become a turning point, raising questions about leadership accountability, personal choices, and how those choices affect ministries that reach millions of people. Let's not forget that this story isn't over yet, it's still evolving. As Christians, we are called to seek truth, pray for wisdom, and be slow to pass judgment. James 1:5 states, "If any of you lack wisdom, let him ask of God who gives to all liberty and without reproach." That's what we need right now, God's wisdom, because these aren't just headlines, they're people's lives. So what do you think about Rodney's rightness to speak out the way he did? Should more pastors stand up for what they believe is right, even if it's unpopular? Or do you think Joni was just doing what she felt was best? Rodney told Jimmy that in January, after Marcus died in November, that Doug was 7. He has no credibility in the body of Christ, aside from possibly Jonathan Shellsworth. But I'm telling you that everyone has told me to avoid Rodney because he runs his mouth and says things that are inappropriate for him to talk to you. If he had a problem with anything, he should have called me. He had my number and talked to me instead of talking to my kids behind my back. Okay, that's not your fault. Rodney called you and you said no. Rodney, that's not true. The Lord has told me what to do with Rodney. I dusted myself off. Okay, does that mean I'll bless him and let him do his thing? But now I know what I'm dealing with. And Marcus had to deal with Rodney before, but just to clear things up, just to clarify, Rodney gave her Jonathan, and we don't need very generous gifts. So it doesn't matter after my dad died $100,000. So he did this out of love. Thank you, Rodney, for the $100,000 you paid for the wedding, but I just showed you that he loves you. He wasn't doing this to try to show you that he had genuine concern though, because he wanted to told me over the phone that he woke up 3 nights in a row, covered in sweat, panicking, and that he had nightmares about Daystar being destroyed, and Joni. He claimed that it was so dark and that he was so bad that he couldn't even get the details out loud at that point. I was really shaken up when he told me this. He claimed that he tried to talk to me, but I was on social media when he DM'd me where Mark was, where Doug and I were for his birthday, and that we were at Steve's place doing business for. He put a teardrop on the DM of the picture of me and Doug, and I wrote to him, "Why the teardrop?" He replied, "Because I'm sad." I asked, "Why are you sad?" He replied, "Because of this picture." That was the first time I ever knew anything at all. And you know who called him? I called him because he didn't have the courage to call me, and I'll say that a lot because there are a lot of people who don't have the boss to call me, okay, and talk to me about it. Eventually he just wanted to get off because everything he said I countered with the truth. Then Jimmy called him, or he wanted to talk to Jimmy, and of course he was completely different with Jimmy, but Jimmy spoke to him and everything, and that was the last time I heard. Okay, so this isn't the first time I've dealt with this man. He's a good man, godly man, who lacks wisdom in many areas, and that's one right there. Not even close, she clapped back, and she made sure her response was heard loud and clear. One of the people Joni responded to directly was Pastor Rodney Howard Brown, the outspoken revivalist, who strongly warned her not to go through with her marriage to Christian therapist Dr. Doug Weiss. Now here's what makes this part of the story even more dramatic. Rodney wasn't just some random critic. In fact, he had previously donated this to Joni personally, a huge gift. That's a lot of money, and many people assumed it came from a place of support, love, and trust. But here's the plot twist. Joni revealed that she used that exact $100,000 gift to help pay for her wedding to Doug Weiss. Yes, you read that right. The man who tried to talk her out of marrying Doug ended up funding the very wedding he was warning against. It's kind of shocking, right? People online had strong reactions. Some found it ironic. Some said it was flat out disrespectful, and others thought Joni was just being bold and unapologetic about her choices. Either way, the move definitely stirred things up, and Joni didn't just ignore Rodney's concerns, she publicly dismissed them. She said that his actions were unnecessary, and she didn't believe he had the right to interfere with her personal life. Basically, she made it clear that she felt Rodney was stepping out of line and that she was going to make her own choices, no matter who tried to stop her. But that's not where the story ends. A letter started circulating. It was from Denise Bogg, someone who has been close to the Lamb family for a long time. In this letter, addressed to Joni children, Denise expressed serious concerns. She believed that Joni was being deceived, and she pointed the finger at Doug Weiss. According to Denise, Denise and others asked a difficult question. If Doug couldn't save his own 30-year marriage, what makes him the right choice for Joni? How can someone teach others about love, commitment, and healing if they're struggling to keep their own relationship together? That's a fair question, and one that many people in the Christian community have been grappling with. What's even more intriguing is how this whole drama transcends just one marriage. It's not just about Joni and Doug, it's a larger discussion about trust, leadership, and accountability in Christian media. Daystar Television Network isn't just another channel, it's been a major force in spreading the gospel for decades. Millions of people worldwide tune in to hear messages of faith, hope, and healing. For a long time, the Lamb family was seen as united, trustworthy, and deeply committed to the Daystar mission. However, with all the back and forth public disputes and family disagreements, people are beginning to ask, what's going to happen to Daystar? Can it survive this season of tension and division? Rodney Howard Brown made a bold prediction. This marriage could actually lead to the collapse of the entire Daystar media empire. Here's what we know. Joni is sticking to her guns over Doug Weiss, who is now a major part of her life, and possibly even her ministry. Some of Joni's own children have expressed their disapproval. Leading Christian leaders are divided, and Daystar fans are confused, hurt, and searching for answers. All of this leaves us with some very important questions to consider. Was it wrong for Joni to disregard the warnings from her family and trusted pastors? Should Christian leaders be held to a higher standard when making important life decisions? Did Pastor Rodney go too far?
What does this mean for the future of Daystar Television Network? As believers, we know that it's acceptable to wrestle with difficult subjects like this. Even in the Bible, we see godly people make difficult decisions, face criticism, and deal with the fall. Reminds me of Proverbs 11:14, which states that when there is no guidance, a people falls, but when there are many counselors, there is safety. For this reason, it's important to seek wise counsel and pay close attention, especially when the stakes are high. At the end of the day, Joni made a decision, and whether or not people agree with it, she's living with the consequences. Now we turn it over to you because we've disobeyed before, but this does not align with your word. I look into scripture in Matthew 19:9, and I tell you that whoever divorces his wife and marries someone else commits adultery, unless his wife has been unfaithful. Do you think Joni was right to disregard the warnings and follow her heart, or should she have waited longer and listened to the voices of concern? Do you think this marriage marks the beginning of the end, or a new beginning for Daystar? Please share your thoughts in the comments section below. We would especially like to hear from you. If you have been a long-time Daystar viewer, or if you have been impacted by Christian media, we will continue to follow this story and bring you the latest news and insights, always with love, truth, and a heart for God's people. Thank you for watching, and as always, stay blessed and anointed one.